All right. Today we're going to look at 1 Samuel chapter 31, and this is going to cover the death of Saul. So where we left off after chapter 30, it ended on a high note for David anyways, because he was able to kind of narrowly escape being part of the Philistine army. Remember, he was in the rear guard of the army that was on their way to attack the Israelite army that's led by Saul. And King Achish trusted him to be in that rear guard, but the other Philistine commanders, they didn't like having him there, so they told Achish to send him away. So David went back to Ziklag, and if you remember, it was burned down, so he went into a battle against the Amalekites that he's just in the process of right now, or finishing up. So he doesn't know what's going on for this battle right now. The narrative is going to move back to Saul to see, kind of put a cap on this story, and we're going to answer a few questions in this chapter. The last time we saw Saul was in chapter 28 when he had the medium contact Samuel, and Samuel told him, tomorrow you and your sons are going to be with me. He prophesied Saul's death. So Saul was distraught, understandably, after hearing that. So in this chapter, we're going to answer a few questions. One, because we're going to hear conflicting stories. The first question is going to be, who killed Saul? The second one, what was the Philistine symbol of victory? And then the third one, why did Saul die? So let's start off at 1 Samuel chapter 31, verses 1 to 5. It reads, "Now the Philistines were fighting against Israel, and the men of Israel fled before the Philistines and fell slain on Mount Gilboa. And the Philistines overtook Saul and his sons, and the Philistines struck down Jonathan and Abinadab and Malchishua, the sons of Saul. The battle pressed hard against Saul, and the archers found him, and he was badly wounded by the archers. Then Saul said to his armor-bearer, 'Draw your sword and thrust me through with it, lest these uncircumcised come and thrust me through and mistreat me.' But his armor-bearer would not, for he feared greatly. Therefore Saul took his own sword and fell upon it, and when his armor-bearer saw that Saul was dead, he also fell upon his sword and died with him." So that's going to answer our first question right out of the gate. It seems obvious. Who killed Saul? Saul killed himself. He asked the armor-bearer to do it for him, and the armor-bearer refused. Now, do we remember who Saul's first armor-bearer was? It was David. And if we remember, David's had multiple opportunities to take Saul's life. And even though Saul is trying to kill David, David refuses to kill the Lord's anointed. And we see that this next armor bearer also refused to. But it's going to come up later because somebody else is going to claim to be the one that actually killed Saul, where we see right there in the scripture, Saul killed himself, and this other person was just trying to make up a story to get a reward, and we'll find out about that. Now, as a side, there is a Jewish tradition that claims that this armor bearer is Doeg the Edomite. So while he did a good thing by not killing Saul, if this truly was Doeg, he's the one that killed all the priests in Nob and then all their families and killed everybody and everything in the city. And if that's the case, then that same sword that killed the priesthood and their families was then used to take Doeg's life, or whoever this armor bearer's life. So, but that is just a Jewish tradition. We don't have that in scripture. But to answer the first question, who killed Saul? He killed himself. It's going to come back up later. Now, verse 7. "And when the men of Israel who were on the other side of the valley and those beyond the Jordan saw that the men of Israel had fled and that Saul and his sons were dead, they abandoned their cities and fled, and the Philistines came and lived in them." So again, Israelite cities are being occupied by the Philistines. So they cut off his head. Verse 9. I guess we shouldn't have skipped 8. Verse 8, the next day, the Philistines came to strip the slain, and they found Saul and his 3 sons fallen on Mount Gilboa. So they cut off his head and stripped his armor and sent messengers throughout the land of the Philistines to carry the good news to the house of their idols and to the people. They put his armor in the temple of Ashtoreth, and they fastened his body to the wall of Bethshan. So, first thing we might notice here is just how graphic and how barbaric this is. We might have also picked up that they're, in verse 9, it says they went to carry the good news, which is the gospel. So the Philistines have their own gospel, but their good news is that Saul's dead. We've defeated the king of the Israelites. We see more about this, the things that were involved in their practices, in this brutality. In 1 Chronicles chapter 10, verse 10, it tells us a little more. It says, they put his armor in the temple of their gods and fastened his head in the temple of Dagon. So if we put that with the text from 1 Samuel, we can see that his armor went into the temple of Ashtoreth. His body was nailed to the wall in Bethshan, and his head was fastened in the temple of Dagon. And we might remember Dagon when they had taken the ark previously, a long time ago in this same book. They had captured the ark. This is when the sons of Eli were killed. They captured the ark and they brought it back to their cities, and they put it in the temple of Dagon, and the statue of Dagon fell over when the ark was in there. So the next morning they stood the statue back up, but he couldn't stand up in the presence of the ark. So the statue fell down again, and this time it broke off his arms and his head. It decapitated the statue. This was a symbol of God decapitating their false god Dagon. Took away the arms, the signs of power, the head, the rulership, took away that. But now that the Philistines have killed Saul, they figure, you took the head of our God. We're going to take the head of your king and put it in the temple of our God. It really is a spiritual battle, and I think that probably in those times they definitely understood it, and even in the times of Christ, which is roughly 1,000 years after this, they understood that this is all just shadows of a behind the scenes spiritual war. So even though David, through God, God empowered David to kill their champion Goliath, and destroy their idol of Dagon, the Philistines still considered this their victory over the Lord, over the God of Israel. Right? That's why they hung up pieces and parts of their victory, like i.e. Saul. But they're not realizing that they're just a tool that God is using to carry out divine judgment. And they are also on that list. So our second question, what was the Philistine symbol of victory? It was making a symbol or making a display of the Israelite king, putting part of him here, part of him there, and his armor over there, in all of their worship places. It's disgusting, but that was their symbol of victory. That's how they spread their gospel. So back to 1 Samuel 31, verse 11. But when the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead heard what the Philistines had done to Saul, all the valiant men arose and went all night and took the body of Saul and the body of his sons from the wall of Bethshan, and they came to Jabesh and burned them there. And they took their bones and buried them under the tamarisk tree in Jabesh and fasted 7 days. So if we might wonder, why do the people of Jabesh Gilead care? And if we might remember back in chapter 11, Saul's crowning achievement, and maybe his only righteous act as a king, was delivering this town from the Ammonites. If we remember, the Ammonites came against Jabesh Gilead, and they told the people, look, we're here to take over. Everybody gouge out your right eyes and you can live. Otherwise, we're going to come kill you. And the idea with the right eyes was they would be useless as far as being able to defend in battles or fight as soldiers. Most of these people are going to be right-handed. Their dominant eye is going to be their right eye. So if they wanted to draw a bow or hide behind a shield and swing a sword, it would really affect them to not have that eye. So they were given that choice. And then Saul was told about that. And the first thing he did as king was go up there and he wiped out those Ammonites and he saved Jabesh Gilead. Those people didn't forget Saul. So they went and they gave him a proper burial as much as they could. So it's sometimes people, you can read this with a big smile. Oh, Saul finally got what he deserved. But there's no joy in the death of Saul. It's a terrible thing. It was a good and a right thing. It was the judgment of God, but it doesn't mean that it's a happy occasion, right? God's sad at the loss of any life. Just understandably, sometimes it needs to be taken, but that doesn't make it joyous. So in close, we're going to see why the Lord allowed things to end this way. And we're going to answer our last question, which was, why did Saul die? In order to answer that, we're going to go to the parallel passage to 1 Samuel 31. The parallel being 1 Chronicles 10. We were there a minute ago. We're going back to verse 13. And it tells us exactly. So Saul died for his breach of faith. He broke faith with the Lord in that he did not keep the command of the Lord. Now, this is talking in reference to the Amalekites when he was supposed to destroy the Amalekites and didn't. That is the command it's talking about. But then after that, it says, and also consulted a medium seeking guidance. This is no good. We can overlook this easily. People often do overlook this. Pagans and some people that consider themselves to be Christians alike sometimes don't see any issues with fortune tellers, Ouija boards, things of that nature. The text clearly states that Saul was killed for his breach of faith. And part of that breach of faith was consulting a medium. We are not to be in contact with the dead. It's a simple rule, and it has extreme consequences. Now, we can keep in mind that the sins of David are on display. They're widely known. As we move forward in 2 Samuel, we're going to see many, many more sins of David. But what's never on that list is a breach of faith. He is the king after God's own heart. He commits basically every other sin known to man, but he never has a breach of faith. He has a breach of character, never a breach of faith. It's never on that list. So that needs to be the lesson for us. So life is hard, and God understands that life is hard. And he knows that we're going to stumble. But when those times come, we need to look for him for guidance and peace, and not to the things of this world, not to fortune tellers, not to money, not to women or men or whatever it is. We need to look to God for the guidance, not to the things of this world. The things of this world are going to die with this world. We need to look for God for guidance. So I hope that blessed somebody today. Thank you for listening.